Okay, so in any language program, a limited amount of time is available for teaching. One of the first problems to be solved is deciding on what should be the selected corpus of the language and incorporated in textbook and in the teaching materials. So this came to be known as the problem of selection. All right, so partly we have um, two aspects of selection that is given the primary attention in the first decade of the 20th century about language teaching. That is the vocabulary selection and the grammar selection. So what is the vocabulary selection? Vocabulary is one of the most obvious components of language and one of the first thing applied linguists turned the attention to. So this would answer the questions they are looking for answers to the question what words should be taught in the second language. They believe that not all language and not all the words in the first language can be applicable in the target language. So there is now the decision on what particular vocabulary, what particular words to be included in the second language. And more or less, they have figured out the criteria on what are the words that they have to include in teaching the second language. Okay, so these are the criteria. We have the first one, the teachability. Okay, so teachability means that in early age, concrete vocabulary. Okay, we have the concrete vocab. Concrete vocabulary is taught early on because it is easy, it can be easily illustrated through pictures or by demonstration. Again, it should include the concrete vocabulary, meaning it can be represented by a thing. Alright, next one is similarity. Okay, so words or items may be selected because they are similar or they have the similar words in the native language. So L1, there was the similarity in L2. Okay, next one is availability. Okay, so words may not be frequent but are readily available. Alright, they come quickly to the mind when certain topics are taught. For example, the word classroom calls to mind what are inside the classroom. It could be the desk, the teacher, or the pupil. And these words might be therefore be worth of teaching in early in the course. So there is the words are readily available. Okay. Next one is the coverage. So the words that cover or include the meaning of other words may be also useful. For example, the word seat might be taught because it includes the meaning of a stool, bench, or a chair. It should be included because it synonymous. And the next one, the defining power. Okay, so some words could be selected because they are useful in defining other words. For example, the word container, it can use to define a bucket or a jar. And the next one is the grammar selection. So the need for systematic approach for selecting grammar, we have now the vocabulary, the words. Now let's proceed to grammar. Uh, that is concerning on the sentences. For teaching purposes was also a priority for applied linguists. For applied linguists from the 1920s, all right? So the number of since we know already the criteria on selecting what are the words to be included in teaching the second language, now we have to proceed with the grammar selection. Okay, how are we going to use those words in forming sentences? So this is particularly referring to the syntactic format. All right, and then gradation here means concern on the groupings and sequencing of the teaching items in the syllabus. So we have here starting from word to syntax, the grammar, and then how to arrange the content in the syllabus design. So let's have first the grammar selection. What are the criteria in selecting the grammar to be included in teaching the second language? We have the first one, simplicity and sensuality. This recommends choosing structures that are simple and more sensual to the basic structure of the language than those that are complex and peripheral. Okay, so you don't need to complicate things here, since our students are learning English as second language. We have to start with the basic. For example, this arrangement here, it could be just a basic arrangement in a sentence. What are the basic arrangement of the sentence? It could be the subject followed by a verb, or it could be subject, verb, complement arrangement. Pick what is simple and relevant to learning the language. Next one is frequency. So frequency refers to the occurrence of this particular structure, how often it occurs in the target language. But more or less, this is given a little progress because there is a much time on deciding on the appropriate grammar units to count, and the difficulty of coding grammatical structure for analysis. Okay, because you have to have how many times it is seen in the target language, and it is very difficult to document that one because of the wide vocabulary, the wide grammatical structures in the English language. So again, we have also, but then again, let us consider this one of the grammar selection, the frequency, how often it occurs in the the target language. The next one is with what we call just the learnability. It should take into account the order in which the grammatical items are acquired in the second language. But then again, it should start with the basic, okay, the basic, the simple one, to the complex one. All right. Alright, and we have this one, the gradation. As we all know, that gradation is the process of sequencing the items in the syllabus. Okay, the need to sequence the course content in a systematic way is also needed for us to achieve this wholesome learning. Okay, so these are the considerations that we have to bear in mind in sequencing the content in our syllabus. Sequencing the content of our syllabus, we have to consider this one, the linguistic distance. Structures, okay? We have to teach first those structures that are similar to the native language or the L1. Next one is intrinsic difficulty. And the principle for the underlying this one is we have to teach first the simple structure before the complex ones in order for our students not to be confused or to understand more. All right. Next one is the communicative need. Okay, so there are in this case there are some structures that will be needed to be taught early and cannot be postponed because this is needed in the next topic. Next one is frequency. Alright, again, frequency is still the occurrence of structure in grammatical items in the target language, how often it may occur in the target language. We can now examine the assumption behind the approaches to syllabus design that emerged in the first part of the 20th century, and in the process reveal the limitations that subsequent directions in syllabus design that they sought to address. The first one is the basic units of language are vocabulary and grammar. Okay, as you can see, based on our previous discussion, that really the teaching of English largely depend on the vocabulary and grammar. So these are the assumptions. Or in fact, that is one of the considerations known in teaching the second language, the vocabulary selection and grammar selection. Alright, the next one is learners everywhere have the same needs. So the focus in language teaching was on general English. Okay, so learners everywhere have the same needs. Okay, in the context of English learning, some of we are studying English because we really wanted to acquire this general English. So that's why For other learners of English as second language and foreign language in the EFL and ESL classroom, they are taught on learning English as the general English. Next is learners' needs are identified exclusively in terms of language needs. No matter who the learners are or the circumstances of learning may be, the end goal of teaching English to our students, especially for ESL and EFL, is to really teach them the language, not to solve problem using the language. Next one is the process of learning language is largely determined by textbook. The primary input learners received to language teaching process was the textbook. Okay, we cannot deny the fact that the primary input that learners received to the language learning process was really the textbook. Whether we admit it or not, it is really the textbook. Hence, the importance of the principles of selection and gradation is very important, or it should be controlled and it should be managed well in order for us to facilitate language learning. Okay, so it must be sequenced from the simple one to the complex one. Okay, previously, during the earlier stage of language curriculum development, the context of teaching English is really the foreign language. So as a summary, we have here the complete illustration according to the book of Richard Jack of 2001, the curriculum development in language teaching. So we have here the origins of language curriculum development from the historical background, the vocabulary selection, the grammar selection, and then the early assumption or early regards on what is language teaching before. Okay, so that's all for today. I hope you learned something, and see you again next time.